Right. Good morning, everybody. It is 8:31 by our clock. So I will go ahead and get this called to order. This is the Regional Transportation Advisory Group Committee meeting for August 6th, 2025. It is 8:31 a.m. and we will start with roll call.
Good morning. Stacy Dupuy. Michaela Owens.
Here.
Christy Inselman for Tom Laws. Here. Ellie Conway for Cody Holman.
Here.
Diane Bevins for Alex Yan. Here. Bob Callahan. Lindy Lindstrom. Clay Tucker. Michelle Barron. Dan Lister.
Here.
Deb Root.
Here.
Bree Brush.
Here.
Deanna Dupuy. Morgan Bisa. Hallie Hart. Nicole Baird Spencer. Andrew Glassfell.
Here.
Hannah Veal.
Present.
Lee Belt. Troy Behunin.
Happy to be here.
Doug Hansen.
Here.
Daryl Romine.
Here.
Caleb Hood.
Present.
Brian McClure.
Here.
Jason Van Gilder.
Here.
Crystal Craig.
Present.
Clemente Salinas.
Present.
Mark Stoyer. Rob Hartsock.
Here.
Brett Laird. Sean Nickel. Chelsea Johnson. Lenny Riccio for Joe McMullen.
Here.
Gabe Finkelstein. Zach Piepmeyer. Mike Toole.
I'm here.
Vince Trimboli for Aaron Bodis. Jason Wild. Stephen Hunt.
Here.
Miranda Carson. Did I hear a here on that?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. We can just barely hear you, Miranda. Curtis Lovelace.
Present.
Jamie Neal. And Cody Lund. Is there anyone that I missed or that came in after I started roll call?
Amy, did you see the note in there about Stacy Dupuy's here, just having issues with audio?
I did not, thank you. Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. We will go ahead and move on to item 2 on our agenda, open discussion and announcements.
Madam Chair, this is Amy. I have 2 announcements. First of all, I would like to announce that we are now accepting nominations for our Leadership in Motion Awards. We'll be accepting nominations through September 26th. Those awards are for projects, 1 each in Boise, Ada, and Canyon counties, as well as individuals, elected officials, professionals, private citizens, as well as businesses and nonprofits. So I encourage you to consider who or what may be deserving. I will point out that your esteemed chair was last year's professional winner. So there is great honor and glory in receiving a Leadership in Motion Award. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to me, but all the information is on the Compass website with a link directly from the homepage. Also, just a quick teaser, on September 24th and 25th will be our next education series, looking at housing and transportation and some of the innovative programs that are going on in Utah. The speaker will be Meg Pageon from Wasatch Front Regional Council, which is Compass's counterpart in the Salt Lake City area. So be watching for information on that beginning early September. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to share? All right, moving into item 3, consent agenda. I will stand for a motion to approve the meeting minutes from July 23rd, 2025.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the meeting minutes from last meeting.
Got a motion? Do I have a second?
This is Caleb. All second.
All right, we've got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Action item 4A is recommend a preliminary locally preferred alternative for the high-capacity transit Let's Ride Treasure Valley Planning and Environmental Linkages Study with Austin and Chris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just provide a brief introduction while Chris pulls up the slides here. But Madam Chair, members of RTAC, Austin Miller, Principal Planner and Planning Team Lead here at Compass. Today, I start the meeting off with a key action item for our Let's Ride Treasure Valley study. This is the High Capacity Transit Planning and Environmental Linkages Study. Compass staff, HDR, have been working on this project with you all for about 1.5 years now. So through your efforts, either on our technical advisory group for the study, your efforts on RTAC, or for many of you, it's actually both. Thank you very much for that. You all have helped us shape the purpose and needs of this study, as well as develop the objectives we want high capacity transit service to support within our region. You've seen updates for the first 2 prior rounds of stakeholder and public outreach and seen how they've shaped the study thus far. Today, Chris Stroud with HDR is going to update you all on the project, briefly touching on what we have done to this point since we've last met with you, present the final screening results and our takeaways. And as I noted, we will ultimately be seeking an action today. So we have a recommendation for you all to consider that will help guide our efforts moving forward. And with that, I will pass the torch on over to Chris. Take it away, sir.
Perfect. Thanks, Austin. And I'll just do a quick check here. You can hear me and see the screen with the presentation, correct?
Yes, we got you.
Great. I'm going to turn off my video just because we're looking at the presentation. I'm on a small laptop today, so forgive me. But I appreciate the intro, Austin, and I guess I just want to add my thanks to all of you as well, because you've all been really coming along with us on this ride, and we are at a really important milestone here, and we're coming up on the close of the study at the end of the year. There's still work to be done, but this is a major milestone and an important point. And again, thank you for all your efforts individually and working with your constituents to help them understand what we're doing and help guide us through the public engagement as well. So we do have a slide deck, and I'll keep this as hopefully informative, but as brief as possible for you. And then we'll get to some questions. And Austin, as he said, is going to pick it back up with an action at the end here. The 3 key things that we wanted to talk with you about, give you a bit of just quick project status, but also the results of the tier 3 and some key takeaways. And then finally, the details on the recommendation that we have as a team and how that could inform the action, should you choose to take an action today. So in terms of just background as to where we're at on the project, I know you've all seen this graphic before. We use it on a pretty regular basis of stepping through the phases that we've been moving on in the project. And I'm really happy to say, and when I got the chance to move this "We Are Here" way over to the right-hand side of the screen, it's a super good feeling. As I mentioned, we still have a fair amount of work to do, but we are at the point where we're going to report out our Tier 3. Throughout the project, we have been meeting all of the various milestones necessary for a planning and environmental linkages study, including our opening, our scoping of options, our development of a draft purpose and need, the various screening levels that we've been working through that have brought us to this final screening level of Tier 3. And now we're ready with some recommendations. Now, following this, we still have to take all of the work that we've done and package it into the Planning and Environmental Linkages, or PELD, document. And that's really what's going to happen between now and the end of the year. So along with this, we have been doing pretty significant community engagement. We've had 2 in-person public meetings and then 1 recent virtual public meeting, and I'll give you some info on that in a moment, as well as meeting with all of you through our technical working group and then others through our community working group as well. So we're feeling fairly good in terms of just at least the level of engagement that we've received from the Treasure Valley community. Now, just to remind you, in terms of the Tier 3, as you know, we started with, gosh, I think it was something like 11 routes that we were looking at originally. And through the Tier 1 and Tier 2 process, we were able to narrow that back to these 3 core routes that we examined during Tier 3. Franklin Fairview, and that was paired with a mode of bus rapid transit, an exclusive bus rapid transit in the center of Franklin and Fairview, moving its way all the way out to Caldwell along the Nampa-Caldwell connection. And then also the Boise Cutoff, which is paired with regional commuter rail. And this is both the Boise Cutoff and the Union Pacific to get out to Caldwell. And then finally, the I-84 184. This was our freeway option that was also bus rapid transit with exclusive bus rapid transit lanes on the outside curb lanes or shoulder lanes. So those were the 3 options that we examined and the modes that we examined in our Tier 3. Now, we put this slide in because we wanted to just remind you of, yes, we are at, the end of the year will be the close of this particular project, but we wanted you to be aware of where we're at in the overall project development process. The process we have to go through to ultimately get to construction and finally operations of something, should you choose to move it forward. And we've done a lot of work and a lot of very important work, but we are still relatively early in the process. We have I would argue, about 5% design of layout of some of the things that we've examined in our Tier 3. So for these 3 routes that I just showed you. And I think it's important that you understand that the work that we're doing through the Planning and Environmental Linkages study is work that then can be used as a basis for the National Environmental Policy Act, so the federal environmental clearance that we would have to go through to move it forward to ultimately get to future layers of design and then ultimately construction and operations. And each of these boxes that you step through, the design just gets better and better. And you get to dial things in terms of level of detail and understanding. You can start to, as you move forward beyond this project, you can start to look at, okay, how can we maximize the benefits? How can we minimize impacts? How can we simplify things? How can we reduce cost? I want you to remember as we go through the results here that these are all things that we can continue to work on as we move forward. So with that said, this is a summary of, I would say, a heck of a lot of analysis and detail that is in a detailed report and matrix showing each of these criterion and how they compare between the different routes that we looked at. Now, this is just, again, a quick view to show you how the Tier 3 scoring came out. But all of these screening criteria that you see here in the middle of the slide, we touched on and compared and contrasted everything from, what's the demand for these different services? What about future growth? What about traffic impacts, funding opportunities, phasing and environmental, a whole host of different criteria. And just remember, for this particular analysis, we are comparing each against one another. So to see of the three, which one performs best. And you can see just from the graphic that, the Boise cutoff actually in more categories performed better over others. And I'll dig into that a little bit further as we move on. Now, as far as big takeaways, I'll kind of start on the left hand of the slide here in the blue, just to give you a sense of where some of these routes performed best. And the Franklin Fairview route performed best in terms of bicycle and pedestrian connectivity into the network. And that's not surprising because that route goes through a number of really developed areas. There's a lot of residential that's directly adjacent to it. And it really is just moving its way through a key part of the overall mobility network within the region. Then moving to the far right of the slide on the red, the top performer of I-84, 184 was really related to traffic. And again, I don't think that's surprising because it is a free flow freeway and we're not having to stop for signals. We're not having to always interact at multiple access points with other traffic, etc. So that seems to make sense there. But then the Boise cutoff itself, the rail option really ranked high for a variety of different criteria in terms of demand, in terms of potential capacity, the actual benefits when Marianne and team, looked at the overall network and adding in rail. It actually benefited many of the other VRT routes as well. It was also a faster travel time. And you can see the list here. I don't necessarily have to go through all of them, but there were just a variety of different things that really set it above others. I will just mention the potential for less property acquisition. And I'll talk more about that in a moment, but I think the important thing with the rail corridor is that while the railroads are private owners, in essence, you would really only have to deal with two private owners, the UP and Watco, who own the Boise cutoff. And these are groups that are accustomed to dealing with passenger rail in other parts of the country as well. So this is not an uncommon thing for them. So it seemed to have its benefits as well. So we wanted to give you a little bit of information. We're not going to go through all the criteria, but at the same time, we knew you'd want to know a little bit about how these compared related to ridership. And I do want to just stress, again, this is a comparative analysis. So our job was not to create the most ridership we possibly could. It was to try and compare each of these three fairly and see which one could potentially generate the highest ridership or the highest demand. And we tried to, again, make it a level playing field to the extent that we could. We made sure that all three were serving the same markets. They had generally stop locations in the same areas, like if it was along a particular road, even though they were, north or south of one another, we made sure they all had stops in that similar location. We made sure that they all, had the same length of alignment and also the same just assumptions for how frequent the service and how the service would actually operate, whether it was rail or bus rapid transit. So again, we wanted a level playing field. It did turn out that the Boise cutoff was the highest performer, and in some cases, fairly significantly. It was more than 100% higher demand than I-84, 184. And 65 to 75% higher demand than the Fairview Franklin route. And the reason that we believe that this is the case is that it's, on the rail corridor, it has the opportunities for higher speed and less interruption of that speed as well. So that seems to make some sense also. Then when we think about our estimates and how we compared cost on these, I've got this slide just as a little introduction. And what we did was referred to really as a parametric cost estimate. We were looking at kind of per mile costs. And as I mentioned before, this is around a 5% design. We did a basic layout. This is not a three-dimensional design, but we did a basic layout thinking about, okay, what is the width of this particular corridor? And we didn't make any assumptions that we would be, for example, taking away lanes of travel or taking away any capacity. Anything that we were assuming is actually widening in order to add in transit lanes. And in case of the rail, we assumed that we would have the use of the existing rail line plus adding a second rail line. So you'd have, two rail, one in each direction, which is sort of the ideal situation. So all of these were quite conservative designs, and that's not to say that in the future you wouldn't look at varying those to try and minimize cost, to try and minimize impact and all kinds of things. But again, right now we're trying to look at them fairly and wanted to make sure we use the same assumptions across the board. Now, we did include, because we are so early in design, a 40% contingency. So in other words, we put 40% extra on top of all costs because we're at a time where there's just a lot of unknowns and a fair amount of risk. And that's quite normal for this level. So that's not an unusual thing. We didn't account for phasing at this point. We assumed you're building the whole thing from end to end. And we also didn't account for cost reductions or any type of value engineering that may simplify some of these and bring those costs down. Now, with that said, I do think it's worth talking about that there are some ways that you could really think about minimizing cost and also getting everything that you want out of any of these options. Franklin Fairview, for example, you could consider, building it in phases or segments. Maybe you first go Boise to Meridian and then to Nampa and then on to Caldwell, depending on building that ridership. Or you lessen the priority, so we don't necessarily have all the exclusivity or exclusive BRT lanes. Some of it is in mixed traffic. And we see, just as a peer, an example of that. Metro BRT in Minneapolis does exactly this type of an approach. So if there's an example you want to look at, we could provide more information and have you dive into that. For the rail, for the Boise cutoff, we could consider really incremental improvements. So in other words, we assumed 2 tracks, one in each direction. But on many systems that are quite similar to this, you can use a single track and have some areas where you have passing track. You can simplify your station infrastructure. You can use repurposed vehicles. There's all kinds of ways you can bring costs down with this. And a project that I've worked on for a number of years in Colorado, which is very similar to this one, called Northwest Rail. It connects from Denver to Boulder, is likely to go, they're working on finalizing funding for it and getting the initial service up in the next few years. It did exactly this approach. And then I-84, 184, again, I think you could consider incremental improvements. There's nothing saying that you couldn't start soon on putting a commuter bus along I-84, 184 in mixed traffic today without the exclusive lanes as a starter service. And another project that I worked on a number of years ago is a good example of this, the Woodlands Express, which is a community outside Houston, which actually attracts a lot of employment and has a lot of residential, but a lot of people also go into Houston for work, and they have their own commuter transit service along the freeways that connect a variety of different locations from the Woodlands around Houston. So again, just to give you a few examples of how these tend to play out in reality versus necessarily how we always evaluate them. So for full transparency, we wanted to show you these parametric estimates and there's 2 parts to this slide you can see. I'll probably focus on the left-hand side here. But what we've tried to do is layer in the cost ranges that we've come up with for each of these. And again, remembering that we're talking very conservative, the widest approach that we would potentially take without any kind of minimization, plus our 40% contingency. But to give you some context as well in this, we've put in some other real costs. All of these are operating, well, these top 2 are operating. The passenger rail in North Carolina that we show at 100 million per mile, the passenger rail in Utah, and I know it sounds like you're going to speak to Wasatch Front here pretty soon. They'll likely mention the front runner service, and this is one of the latest costs. All of these costs are within the past 5 years. But the latest expansion of the front runner service was about 80 million per mile. And then you start to see the Boise cutoff, Franklin Fairview, and the I-84, 184 per mile costs come in with Boise cutoff at the highest between 53 and 89 million per mile, Franklin Fairview at 48 to 81, and I-84, 184 at 43 to 72. And these are, fairly significant ranges because of where we're at in the design process. However, these ones at the bottom, this is a regional BRT in South Carolina at about 25 million per mile. This is another one that my company is working on, and it's moving towards construction soon. And then the passenger rail in Colorado at about 17 million per mile. And I would argue that through really refining that design, your cost would really need to be coming down into, some range between here and these other options. So I guess I just want to make sure that you understand that there are going to be opportunities to refine, but this gave us a good look to be able to compare how the three look against one another. So, and we did the same in sort of total cost over here, and you'll have this slide deck, so you can dive into this as deeply as you like. It's entirely up to you, and we're happy to, work with questions when we get to that point of the presentation. So very quickly, as I mentioned in the beginning, we had a stakeholder workshop, and this was an online public meeting. It was self-guided. So it was available to the public between June 6th and June 29th. And we did an online questionnaire in addition to providing a lot of information about this Tier 3 evaluation. And at the same time, or right before that, we actually met with many of you in our technical working group to review this and go through some refinements. Now, Amy did an amazing job of really boosting this in all different media forms, but we did social media in English and Spanish and really boosted that so it came up in people's feeds. News releases, VRT was really helpful in allowing us for bus ads again, newspaper, email blasts, a whole host of different great ways of getting information out. And it showed because your constituents definitely turned out for it. We had almost 2,000 that were total users. And what we mean by that is we track, when someone accesses the website itself so that we can understand, the amount of time that they're spending. And this is almost 2,000 that spent sufficient time at least looking at the information. Now, as you know, most of us look at things and then we don't always fill out the questionnaire, but we did get about 500 questionnaire respondents, and that was really helpful as well, plus a few additional just that came in via email. And also with the web, it's tough because we want to make sure that the people responding and looking at it are actually from the community that we're working in. And that appeared to be true here. You can see Boise, Meridian, Nampa, Caldwell, and Eagle. The top four, those are our communities that really we wanted to make sure turned out to provide feedback. And of that, if you look at the infographic to the right here, about 80% of respondents agreed with the Boise cutoff as the best choice. About 92% of respondents thought that the station locations made sense in terms of, where people go to and from. And then, their reasoning behind the Boise cutoff really had to do with efficiency, transit ridership, and reliability, almost equally. And then we asked about challenges as well, just to make sure we understood. And again, fairly equally, property acquisition, any increase in taxes to pay for something like this, as well as impacts to traffic. And those are things that, again, do not surprise me in terms of the kind of feedback that we received. So this brings me to my final slide, which is really, I know we're throwing a lot of information at you, but again, this shouldn't be anything that is 100% new to all of you, considering that you've been a part of the project all along and have been part of the communications. And again, we certainly appreciate that. But what we're asking today as a team is we have a recommendation of a route and a mode, being the Boise cutoff and commuter rail. And we're recommending that you accept that as your preliminary locally preferred route. And I know that that's a weird terminology, but it's actually specific as to what we want to do with our federal partner, FTA, who could be a funding partner in this in the future. So we want to use their terminology here as well. And I just wanted to note that I think there's only upside to potentially selecting a preliminary locally preferred route today, if you choose to, because there's several reasons. But one is that the information that we are developing in the Pell, if it's used within the environmental process within the next 5 years, you can simplify that future environmental and sort of move more rapidly through it. So there's the potential to really save time and money moving forward. But it also allows you to then, be transparent about if there is agreement around the Boise cutoff, to be transparent with the public that this is the primary corridor and mode that you are focused in on. It, as I mentioned, simplifies federal compliance. It clarifies direction with stakeholders. You could start working more directly with the freight railroads if this is, kind of identified. You can, with additional funding and beyond this project, you could refine the capital and operational costs and really start to bring those costs down into something more, into more the range that you'd be looking for. And looking at how you improve the overall operations of the potential options. Now, one other piece too that I'll be clear on here is that by accepting or choosing the Boise cutoff as the preliminary locally preferred, it doesn't mean that the others just drop off the table. It does allow all of those to move forward towards NEPA, but again, you would have a unique focus on the Boise cutoff. And frankly, if through the environmental process you find new information that changes your thoughts on this, you can change that locally preferred route as well. So with that, Austin or the chair, maybe I'll throw it back over to you for facilitation of questions.
Thank you very much. That was really informative. Does anyone have any questions for Chris or Austin?
I do, Crystal. This is Lenny with Highway District 4.
Go ahead.
Hey, you touched on at the very beginning the grid with the maintenance costs between rail and the I-84 option. You mentioned that those appear to be about the same. Seems to me that perhaps the rail would be more expensive for maintenance and require some unique infrastructure to maintain. Could you let me your thoughts on that between that and just maintaining a paved road?
Yeah, it's the maintenance costs that we're thinking of are total maintenance costs. So for the fleet itself, so both require, a certain level of facility. Now, VRT already has a maintenance facility. However, there's expansion that might be necessary as well as growth of the overall system. So when we think about buses in general, there's still a maintenance function associated with it, not just the roadway itself and the lanes. And the same is true for the rail. A unique maintenance facility would be necessary, and it's likely that for the rail, fewer vehicles would be needed than for the bus services as well. So there's just a couple differences there. Again, these are fairly high level costs. We do have more details that we can dig into with you all on it, but those are sort of the basics that we see, if that helps.
It does. Thank you.
Sure.
I'll go ahead and keep the questions going. Chris, can you elaborate a little bit more on any of the specific outreach that was done to Watco or UP? I have a slight concern that the owners of the rail, if they're going to be a non-starter and say absolutely not, it's never going to happen.
Yeah. Austin, I might call on you for this one because we actually have had ongoing outreach and conversations with the railroads, and Compass has really been leading on that part of it, and we've been supporting. But Austin, I don't know if you want to talk about that more, or I can throw some in there as well. It's up to you.
I am absolutely glad to chime in on that one, Madam Chair. So yes, Watco, and it's an organization called Benish, who's sort of the government affairs support for Union Pacific. We've been coordinating with them throughout the entirety of the study. Thankfully, we were able to get in contact with them relatively early on. We've had several meetings exclusively with those rail organizations, as well as they've been provided all of the materials for our technical working groups meetings and have been provided those presentations as well. So they are kept up to speed throughout. We've also shared some data with them and them with us as well, back and forth, just so they know exactly where we stand. Also, one thing that I'm incredibly happy with, we do have a meeting scheduled on Monday with a director at Union Pacific specifically who is aware of the project and wants to know more. So similar type presentation Chris will be helping us out with next week. And again, just making sure that those partners, as they are a very critical stakeholder if we want this to move forward, know what we're thinking and why.
Amazing, thank you. I have some additional questions that are really, I don't know that they're directly related to this, just Crystal's lacking in knowledge on the subjects. So with roadways, we have the right of eminent domain if necessary. Does the same rule apply in Idaho to rail? if it's a passenger rail, primary benefit type of thing?
It's a very good question. I'm not sure I can honestly answer that for Idaho. I'm not sure if the Compass staff can as well. That might be one that we would need to circle back and follow up on. I think it depends on usually it's an agency that has that authority, but it does vary from state to state. So yeah, I apologize. I can't answer that one.
Made me feel a little better that somebody else didn't know the answer to that as well.
Yeah.
And then my third question, and this is a VRT-esque question. So Idaho has a transit authority that doesn't have a dedicated funding source. And I've only ever lived in Idaho, so I don't know what the other states that have passenger rail do for things like this. But would this be a mechanism if rail went in, passenger rail specifically, and VRT was the owner operators or the mechanism to make that happen? Would this be a mechanism to try and get that changed legislatively for a dedicated funding source, or would most likely passenger rail be owned and operated by another agency, not VRT?
Yeah. I can take a stab at maybe opening this, and I'm not sure, Amy, if you want to chime in here as well, but it's an opportunity, definitely. One of the things that we would need to secure funding going forward is an agreement on owning and operating the service and an understanding of long-term funding for the rail corridor or the BRT, whatever it would be. So would be a critical piece. So whether that's VRT or some other type of organization that would have to take that on, VRT may be the most likely given their expertise in this area. It makes sense. But it could be in different states, it is done differently as well. There are certain special districts that can be created to address the owning and operating of rail as well, or other types of transit services. So on the Compass side, Austin or Amy, I'm not sure if you have more to add to that.
I'll add one quick thing. This is Amy, and then I'm going to punt it over to Stephen with VRT. First, our assumption has been that VRT would be who would be owning and operating this system. And as I said, I'll punt this to Stephen in just a second. But also Compass's funding study, one of the 4 pieces that we looked at that specifically was how states are funding their public transportation. It was not specific to rail. It was across all types of public transportation, but there's probably some rail specific information we could tease out of that. And then I'll punt to Stephen.
Yeah, so the only thing that I would add to that, because I think the way you framed your question was whether or not this would allow an opportunity for some kind of dedicated funding. And I think the order of that would probably just be reversed. Like having something like this is something that we could ask and say, we'll need dedicated funding in order for this to happen. Because as Chris was saying, the next steps of going into the environmental require us to be able to show that we have the financial capacity to deliver the project. And we can't really show that without having a different sort of financial arrangement than we currently have. So if we're setting up the dominoes, I think the things that we would be looking at doing is getting some kind of reliable funding source in place prior to moving into the NEPA.
Thank you. That clarifies some stuff.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, this is Jason with Middleton. These stations typically have large publicly funded parking garages that next to them. Is that included in these estimates?
Yes, it is currently included. We made parking assumptions at honestly a majority of stations after some discussions with VRT and some of the other stakeholders as well. So for now, we have made assumptions of parking, not necessarily structured, because many of these areas do have sufficient space, particularly as we get further west, where it could be surface parking. So it is a little less expensive, but that has been factored in. As this moves forward, that would get more refined if you wanted to do more of a compact footprint, structured parking, et cetera, and it would continue to be refined in terms of the cost going forward. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you. Do you have an estimate of what per ride cost might be?
We didn't make an assumption on fares that we would choose, etc. So at this point in time, at this level of planning, we don't have that specific level of detail. However, I will say if it moves forward into the FTA process for funding, that is a metric that we would need to have more detail on. Right now, we're looking at sort of more gross overall cost and comparing those to one another to again try and tease out which one maybe is the best performer. But at this point in time, no, we don't have that exact information.
Thank you.
Sure.
Go ahead, Stephen.
Related to cost, one of the things that was interesting to me is looking at the range of costs and then also the ridership. So Jason, I wasn't sure if you were talking about the fares that would be charged per rider or if it was the overall cost per rider. But in any case, I was thinking just comparing the range of costs to the ridership projections. I was encouraged by the fact that it does look like with the ridership on the rail corridor being 65 to 100% more than the other options and the range of costs overlapping between them, it seems like your cost per rider should be kind of comparable. And that's before we get into some of the value engineering and the many things that Chris was saying in terms of how we control for costs moving forward. But in terms of comparison, maybe Chris, you could speak to whether or not there's a huge outlier in the cost per ride at this level, if there's anything you can say to that.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. And that's a more nuanced way to put it. I appreciate it. It's as it stands now, compared to the level of ridership, our costs are high, but you can see in comparison to other services that are out there that they're not out of the realm of reality of what we see on these types of services. And really what I would suggest is to think about how, as we move forward, we try and optimize all of the services to get that cost per rider down. Once we officially know if it's, again, just a sheer comparison of ridership versus cost. But to try and get that down and try and increase ridership and get your cost down, because that is a key metric that FTA is going to want to see and understand. And the stronger that can be, the stronger your case is going to be for funding through one of FTA's programs. And what we've been targeting here is likely what's called the New Starts program. It's their one of their key programs for relatively large projects like this. And that is a key metric that would have to be met, and it's always the most important to them, which is your cost in comparison to the amount of ridership that you can generate.
To follow up on both those questions, are any of the other this industry, the fares usually only cover a small percentage of the overall cost of per rider trip. Is that your experience?
Yes, that's correct. I mean, to be fair, it's true about any transportation option. I mean, roadways are subsidized just as transit is subsidized. All of these things don't necessarily pay for themselves, but it really is about, generating whether it's economic development that could come out of some of these options that we're looking at and trying to optimize, whether it is options and choice of being able to travel in different ways, whether it's congestion management. I mean, all of these are sort of compelling reasons that we look at transit, but you're spot on. I mean, it is something that usually doesn't fully cover the overall cost. And it's still to be determined as to what that metric would look like as this moves forward and gets refined further and is more real in terms of what the operations are and what the design would be.
Thank you.
Sure.
And the ridership is visioning mostly going to Boise. Is that so? There'd be like maybe 3 trains in the morning to Boise and maybe 1 reverse train.
Right now, we were assuming we did a fairly simple assumption across the board of a 15-minute peak service, and I believe it was on the train hourly service off peak and 30-minute service for the BRT. So that was just the base assumptions so that we could compare. Now, as you move forward, I mean, I kind of mentioned the Colorado project, and that's one that has sort of a very similar approach to what you just described. They're going to have 3 trains in the morning, 3 trains in the afternoon, and then one train, actually, 1 or 2 trains midday. So you can tailor it to whatever the needs are going to be. Now, one of the things that we do see, though, is that kind of post-COVID, and you all see this just in the road and congestion, that you have congestion throughout the day as opposed to these sort of peak times that we historically had. So we want to make sure we're tailoring it to what the conditions are and the needs are and where the demand really is. But it is flexible, absolutely.
Madam Chair,
Go ahead, Stephen.
just to follow up on that and maybe clarify a little bit, Jason, what was assumed in terms of the services? I can't speak to the ridership because I didn't see any of those projections in terms of where they were going. But in terms of service design, it was intended to make connections throughout the valley. So not just to downtown Boise, but both the location of the stations and then the amount of service. So it's not just directional into Boise in the morning and then out of Boise in the evening, but a service throughout the day going to the destinations along the entire corridor. And one of the reasons that it was so critical when we did our purpose and need statement was to make sure that whichever of these alternatives connected the downtown, connected each of the communities along the corridor. And so that was something that was built into the design from the beginning, was we wanted to make sure that whichever of these alternatives moved forward served the valley in a good way, in a distributed way, not just like trying to get people into downtown Boise, for example.
Yeah. Thank you. If you don't mind, you probably cut me off, Crystal, if I talk too much here, but I came from Western Washington, where Sound Transit was kind of prominent, and actually worked for a community that had a commuter rail station in it. And it was sold as interconnectivity. It really ended up being people going to downtown Seattle was really the draw or at least heading towards the metro areas. So uh, uh, it's hard to believe you're going to have that many people going from Napa to Caldwell, or even Meridian to Caldwell. The real draw is to get off the freeway and get to Boise or the airport. And so the train stations kind of ended up being wastelands in the middle of the commuter cities that came through. So I think that's maybe a realistic expectation. And that brought me to my question. You mentioned a number of communities, but didn't talk about the Sound Transit or the Western Washington option. And that might be familiar to a number of the people that have moved here, generally from the Washington or California or Oregon area. Do you have any experience with that system there and how that compares to what you're planning here?
I do. I have worked on the Link Light Rail system in the Seattle area, and I think there's a couple things. It's so I didn't work on the Sounder service or some of the more commuter rail based services there. Some of the challenges, though, that they have in that area have to do with geography as well. I mean, with the limitations and just the water in the area and the water crossings that are necessary to make some of these happen. So it is a bit of a different comparison. And what we tried to find were some comparisons, whether that was Utah or Colorado, et cetera, that maybe just from a sort of functional perspective were really comparable here. So that was at least our thought. It's not to say that some of these aren't good examples as well. The one thing I will say, though, is that when it comes to, how services get used, it's not just about the one line that we're talking. It's about the overall network and how much VRT service today could connect into it and how much that could grow to connect into it as well. Because it's about the total network and how, I guess, dynamic that can really be, that can attract overall ridership. To be fair, in the Seattle area, Sound Transit and many of the other sort of commuter services that come in from many of the outlying areas have some of the highest ridership that we see in the country. they've done quite well, even though everyone's taken a hit post-COVID, but they're continuing their expansion also. So it's just a little bit of context for that. I'm not going to pretend I'm an expert on all of their system, though, and particularly for those of you that have lived there and really experienced it inside and out.
Thank you.
Sure.
Really great questions, everyone. Thank you. Are there any other burning questions? Can you put the action item back up on the?
Okay, Chris, can you go to the next slide, please? Perfect. Madam Chair, staff does have a recommended motion for you today. It is on the screen.
Thank you. Are there any other questions that we need answered, or does anyone have a motion one way or another on this one?
Madam Chair,
Go ahead, Stephen.
I would move that the RTAC recommends the Compass Board of Directors approval of the commuter rail along the Boise Cutoff Corridor as a preliminary locally preferred alternative for the Let's Ride Treasure Valley Pell study.
Thank you, Stephen. I will go ahead and second that motion.
Madam Chair, comment?
Yeah.
I just wanted to, again, thank Compass for all the work that they've done and the consultant on this project, and kind of reiterating some of the comments that we've even had through this discussion, that we were really careful on trying to set up a purpose and need statement that identified the need we were trying to do, which is connect all of these communities and do so in a way that supports the travel demand, which I know is as much between the communities as to end. That's something we talked a lot about, is travel time end to end versus movement along the corridor. And I'm just really excited about the opportunity that this provides the region in taking advantage of an existing piece of infrastructure that can, we believe, really transform how the rail corridor works, has benefits both for passenger rail as well as for freight. And anyways, I just wanted to reiterate our support for both the process and this particular motion. And we're excited about the ways that we can continue to evaluate the rail corridor and address both the costs and the other concerns that have come up with this today.
Thank you, Stephen. Is there any other discussion on this? We do have a motion and a second. All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye. Nay.
Sounds like motion carries. Thank you. Really good. You handled a lot of questions there. So thank you, guys. Action item B is the recommend the end of year redistribution program priorities with Tony.
Hello, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I am Tony Tisdale, Resource Development Team Lead, and this item is for end of year and redistribution program revisions. So as we near the end of the federal fiscal year, we need a plan to ensure that all the fiscal year 2025 federal funds are obligated, as well as a plan to use any additional funds that may come in through redistribution. We originally brought the list of needs to you back in May, which was recommended back then and also approved by the Board of Directors in June. Since then, we have received some additional needs to be added to this list from ACHD, ITD, and Compass. Several actions have occurred since May, and we determined that additional funding will be available through redistribution, especially in the Boise urban area. This item starts on page 9 in your packet. And as a reminder, the end of year and redistribution program occurs every year. The Idaho Transportation Department sweeps or takes funds that are not ready to obligate starting July 1st and reprograms those to projects that are ready to obligate. Therefore, the first reprogramming occurs in about mid-August, and then that is followed by the Federal Highway Administration sweeping or taking funds from areas across the nation and redistributing those funds across the states that have available projects to use those funds. And redistribution occurs in early September. Both of these programs occur near the very end of the fiscal year. Therefore, projects must be ready to obligate funding immediately upon award. meaning that all the paperwork, deposits, and all the things that need to occur before obligation are already in place when the agency is notified. We program up to 100% of the expected allocation. However, Congress typically limits our funding availability. And this year, most programs were limited to about 66% of what we thought we would be getting. When redistribution is received, we expect to bring our funding levels up to 100%, plus actually a little bit more than that. So Board Policy 2024-03 provides the direction on balancing, including specific criteria for the end of year and redistribution program. The first priority is to bring the ability to use 100% of the allocated funding, followed by the needs that are currently in the Surface Transportation Program, Transportation Alternative Program, and Carbon Reduction Program in the order of importance to keep those projects moving forward. And then finally, the policy allows projects funded in other programs that are eligible to be considered for funding through these programs if it's available, again, in the order of importance to keep those projects moving forward. So this table is for the Boise urban area, showing the proposed priorities back into May that were approved in June. Any text in blue is changed from the last time you saw it. The asterisks and the text in italics designates new requests, and the icons provide the criteria for the board policy. So it kind of ties back to what those criteria are. In this list, there was an item for payback. However, ACHD and the City of Meridian ended up not borrowing obligation authority from the Idaho Transportation Department. Therefore, the payback was removed and replaced with the full cost of the two projects that were placed on hold until redistribution is received. Number 3 and 4 on the list are new projects from ACHD. They are recommended in the order based on where the projects are in the process. So I'll kind of explain the thought process here. Number 2 through 5 are all in the construction phase. Number 2 is already under contract, but has a cost overrun. Number 3 is already bid, but the bid was higher than the engineer's estimate. Number 4 is already obligated, but was held to finalize right-of-way acquisition. And since some time has passed since obligation, the construction dollars or construction amounts are adjusted for engineer's estimate based on inflation. And then number 5 is just getting finalized with the final design and is ready for obligation probably this week. Number 9 has a cost increase to get the project to final design. Number 10 is a cost increase in planning to cover technical work on long-range planning activities and also fund some additional local projects. Number 11 on this list was originally expected to be able to advance from 2026, but it's not quite ready to advance, and so we're recommending it being removed from the list. The new number 11 is an ITD project that's in Ada County that includes advanced construction, or in other words, it has construction over 2 years, and so this would replace that second year's funding. And number 12 was originally funded with a RAISE grant and needs additional funding to get to the final design. So if funding comes in, as we expect it will through redistribution, we anticipate being able to fund down to number 11, which would be partially funded at about $1.4 million. The proposed projects in the Nampa area had no changes. We expect that priority number 1 will be funded. That one was already programmed and takes it to 100%. But we don't expect any other needs in the Nampa area will be funded through redistribution, as there were other cost increases in other areas of the state that were prioritized higher than advances. So I will stand here for any questions and then move forward to a motion.
Thank you, Tony. Any questions? I have one small question for you, Tony. I think you mentioned that in the Boise urban area, we're projecting funding down to number 11. Can you give some context why 11 was scored, why an advanced construct was scored higher than something going into final design?
Because in the policy, the 2024-03, the construction is always going to be higher than a design project.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Stephen.
Tony, I'm sure we talked about this, but can you remind me what the key points about the unable to advance the Safe Routes to School project were
Right.
at this time?
We actually advanced the 2025 last year during the same type of process. And there was, at the office, as you're aware, there was some staff turnover at VRT, and they're a little bit behind in billing. And so they're just now starting to build the 2025 project. I think we'll end up spending all of that. This money on the old number 11 is already programmed for 2026, so there's no danger in losing the money. It's just, it's too early to advance it at this point.
That's
It's
great.
just
Thank you.
some staffing issues, but
Any additional questions for Tony? We
Is
have a
there-
recommended motion on the board.
Madam Chair,
Yeah, Diane?
I will make a motion that our TAC recommends Compass Executive Committee's approval of the year, end of year and redistribution program priorities as revised.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any questions or discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Tony. Action item 4C is recommend adoption of resolutions amending the Communities in Motion 2050 and approving the FY 2026 to 2032 Regional Transportation Improvement Program with Austin and Tony again.
Quite the name on that one, right? My apologies. Madam Chair, Austin Miller, Principal Planner, Planning Team Lead here at Compass. This is another action item. So for this item, we're going to be seeking RTAC recommendation on two resolutions. One amending Communities in Motion 2050, which I will discuss here momentarily. The second is approving the FY 2026 through 2032 Regional Transportation Improvement Program, also known as the TIP, that I'll pass it on over for Tony to discuss with you all. So why do we amend Communities in Motion? Well, Communities in Motion includes those funded capital projects that are significant to our region or those projects that are using federal funds. The key word there is funded, as Communities in Motion also includes a list of unfunded projects within it that are highlighted as needed, but we don't necessarily have an identified funding source for at the time. So why this amendment though? Oh, my apologies, got a little ahead of myself. There we go. While it is budget season for all of your member agencies, and thankfully we do have a few projects that we've identified that we didn't originally expect to be able to pay for. However, since then, a funding source has been identified. So by amending Communities in Motion, this allows these projects to move forward onto our funded list and make sure that we're keeping our long-range transportation plan as accurate as possible while enabling work to begin on these projects. So for that work to begin, they also need to be included in the Transportation Improvement Program, hence why we have the two resolutions before you on this item. One is the list of projects funded in Communities in Motion, and then the other resolution is to get those projects, as well as others, programmed into the Transportation Improvement Program. My usual reminder, these numbers on the slides, just a placeholder. They don't get set until it's actually in the board packet. So when the board sees it, there will be a formal number provided at that time. For the Communities in Motion amendment, we are proposing to fund 4 total projects. We have 2 pathway projects as well as 2 roadway projects, and I'll touch on each of them briefly. So the first roadway project is, I guess, still accurate. Communities in Motion number 3 priority corridor, U-Stick Road. It is certainly not the entire corridor. However, getting a portion of this corridor widened is identified as a priority in our regional long-range plan. This proposed project accomplishes about a mile of that corridor. Similarly, Middleton Road. This one is actually the number 1 priority local roadway project, and again was identified as unfunded in our long-range transportation plan. This project, Tony and I actually really had an awesome conversation. Thank you so much to Jason Van Gilder with the City of Middleton for reaching out. We had a conversation, the City of Middleton, City of Caldwell, HD4, and private developers are all partnering together to get a portion of this Middleton Road corridor south of the river widened, as well as adding a couple roundabouts in there as well. Onto the pathways, the City of Boise has the Reidenbach Canal pathway. It is to connect Maple Grove and Milwaukee. So for those of you a little less familiar, this is over by the Boise Town Square Mall. This, again, was identified in Communities in Motion as a high priority pathway project, but unfunded. This proposed project will get a 12-foot wide pathway along the south side of the canal there. And then State Highway 44. This project is a detached pathway along that south side for a whopping 5.5 miles, extending from the city of Star into the city of Eagle, with construction in the TIP component program for 2029. In terms of schedule for this one, we went out to public comment from July 15th through July 31st. We have it before you all today, seeking your recommendation. If that is received, we will then bring this before our board on their August 18th meeting. We did receive a number of comments. I believe it was 27 in total. You can read them all verbatim in your packet as part of the supplemental. Sampling is shown here on the screen. Ultimately, staff is not proposing any changes to the projects based on the comments received. With that, I am glad to stand for questions before I pass on over to Tony for the tip side. We're also glad to save them to the end.
Thank you. So I'm going to take over now to talk about the approval of the fiscal year 2026 to 2032 Regional Transportation Improvement Program. We'll cover at a high level the project list and the changes, the public comments, and the timeline for final approval. This item starts on page 16, along with the item that Austin just talked about. So in the big picture of the Resource Development Program, needs are identified in Communities in Motion 2050, and those needs directly impact the projects that are funded in the Regional Transportation Improvement Program, which is the short-term budget of all federally funded or regionally significant projects. Your agency submit applications to fill transportation needs in the TIP development process through the federally funded project list, and this process occurs annually. The Regional Transportation Improvement Program takes about a year to develop, starting with the application in the fall, and then the selection process involving your reviews, scoring, and ranking, followed by your recommendation to move forward with the draft TIP project list. The draft project list is provided in the RTAC supplement, and the major changes list starts on page 22 in your packet. The project list and major changes list have included all of the new information, as well as a few tweaks since the last time you saw it. All of that information is outlined in the major changes list and also represented in the detailed project list. And note that that major changes list does include scores for all new projects to ensure that projects are consistent with Communities in Motion 2050. In the public comment period, we received 23 comments directly relating to the projects in the TIP. There are no substantial changes that resulted from public comments received. We will share the comments with all Compass member agencies, as well as specifically those agencies that are mentioned within the comments. And we do encourage you to read all the comments. A lot of people had some very interesting comments and some very personal comments this time. I noticed going through them. So you will be getting them if they specifically are related to your projects, but the entire list of projects are included in the packet. ITD also held a public comment period for the statewide program at the same time. Once they process their comments, they'll share the ones that pertain specifically to Ada, Canyon, and Boise counties, and we'll post those along with the comments that we received through our process. Something a little bit new this year, we developed a list of projects in Boise County for informational purposes. It's provided, started on page 27 in your packet. This list will not be part of the tip, but it is considered an unofficial list of projects for the Boise County members. These projects are included in ITD's statewide program as well, but we pulled those out for convenience of our Boise County member. On the approval timeline, today we're requesting RTAC to recommend the approval of the fiscal year 2026 to 2032 project list for the transportation program. And in August, on the 19th, we will be asking the Compass Board to approve the TIP. September 19th, the Idaho Transportation Board will be reviewing the statewide program and hopefully make that recommendation as well. And in November, December timeframe, we expect federal approval through Federal Highway Administration and the Federal Transit Administration. So we will stop here for any questions, either on the amendment to Communities in Motion 2050 or the recommendation to approve the TIP.
Thank you, Tony. Are there any questions for Austin or Tony? Hearing none, I will stand for a motion.
Madam Chair,
Go ahead, Stephen.
I move that RTAC recommend Compass Board of Directors adoption of the resolutions amending CIM 2050 and approving the 2026-2032 TIP as presented.
I'll second that.
All right, we've got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Austin. Next item is information discussion 5A, review Compass development projects with Olivia.
Hi, Madam Chair and members of RTAC. My name is Olivia Vilsich-McKinnon, and today I'm providing an information item talking about some of the development products that we have here at Compass. Just kind of as a quick refresher on the tools that we offer to you all as member agencies, so that you can be aware of what we're working on and what might be a benefit to you and your agency. So as we all know, we live in a fast growing community. And so in order to kind of keep track of and pay attention to how our development and growth is aligning with our goals.
Are you interested in an update on Compass's projects and
sorry. So all of these tools tie back to Communities in Motion, to our goals of safety, economic vitality, convenience, and quality of life, just to keep, as I mentioned, a track of how well we're growing and whether or not it's aligning with those goals. So those four on the screen that we're going to be talking about today are our entitlement tracking, development review checklist, our development monitoring report, and our population estimates is what we'll be going into today. So entitlement tracking is a largely internal tool that we use. Essentially, we get information from you all with emails for new development applications, projects that have been built, and we track it all on GIS. So as you can see, this is a pretty high level overview of what the region looks like. So those pinkish red areas are developments that haven't been built yet. They're in some stage of planning or approval, versus those gray areas that are already built up. So as you can see, some areas have more development going on versus some that are already constructed. And we do this to track and pay attention to things like the number of residential lots that are being proposed, the number of jobs in commercial areas, and just so that even though it's not built yet, we can have a good idea if we're looking at a project or something, knowing what is planned for the future. Using the information sent to us for these applications, we also provide development review checklists. So these are all on our website. You can see the ones from this current year, those are updated as they're submitted by us to you all. And you can also look at the archive if you're interested in looking in years past. So not every application that comes our way gets a checklist. It meets, the ones that move forward meet this minimum threshold of 100 households or more, 100,000 square feet or 250,000 square feet of commercial or industrial. This is a quick overview of the number of checklists that we've completed throughout the years. So you'll see there's a big drop off from 2022 to 2023. We updated the threshold. We actually raised it in 2023 from like 50 households to 100. And so that we expected, or at least we're not surprised that the number of checklists we completed dropped in 2023. However, we were pretty surprised in 2024 why there was such a drop off there. And so we were kind of working internally to figure that out. And then we also got a lot of feedback from some of our member agencies, some of you all letting us know that some of our emails weren't working quite right. So we weren't getting all of the applications that we needed to be. And so just wanted to highlight that we're super grateful for you all reaching out to us and letting us know. And if you see issues like that or things that you think should be happening but aren't, please reach out to us because we weren't sure what was going on and now we've been able to resolve that. So on our checklist, the first little section here is a quick snapshot of how well a proposed development aligns with our forecasted vision for the region. So it'll show the category if it's an existing neighborhood, in an activity center, in a future neighborhood, things like that, and whether or not it aligns with the forecasted jobs and population for that area. The next section uses these checklists to represent our 4 goals. So we use these check marks looking at safety. We pay attention to bike and pedestrian stress, quality of life. We look at active, auto, and public transportation. Convenience, we look at how close this development is to existing schools, parks, and public transportation. And then economic vitality, we look at distance to activity centers, impact on farmland, and then our fiscal impact tool that I'll go into a little bit more detail in a minute. So our fiscal impact tool is a tool that summarizes basically the fiscal impact of that development. So we look at each specific area and see kind of what revenue is predicted through impact fees, taxes, et cetera. We even look at, there's a certain number of homes proposed. We expect this many people are going to have dogs, and this is how much money we're going to get from pet fees. So it gets pretty detailed versus the cost of the population coming in. So impact to safety and emergency services like fire and police, the schools, the cost of that with new kids coming in and things like that. And these are all summarized and provided a break-even year, whether or not those revenues and costs are going to break even throughout the city, the county, the highway district, and the school district. All of this is summarized on, on this main cover page, just provided as a snapshot for you all for these developments. So you can have a quick look to see how well it fits in and aligns with Communities in Motion. There's an area there to provide some comments from us to give some more nuance to the information provided. And then on the following pages, there is some more information about specifics to this development. And with that, I'll turn on time over to Austin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of RTAC, Austin Miller, Principal Planner, Planning Team Lead here at Compass. I'll be sort of serving as the bread and the Big Mac here, starting at middle and end, but these are a few items I wanted to take your time to highlight. So the Development Monitoring Report, if you're a member of our Demographic Advisory Work Group, you see this every year. However, members of RTAC far less often. So wanted to bring it before you all today. As Olivia mentioned, and as we all know, our region is growing incredibly fast. So us here at Compass using some of that entitlement data and the building permit data specifically that is provided by your all's building departments. Thank you. We develop what we call our development monitoring report and then summarize back out all of that growth that we are seeing within the two-county region. So you can see we are growing incredibly fast. That's nothing new for our region. It's sort of held relatively constant there at the top. And we can summarize it in all sorts of different ways. So I'll go through a few of them real quick here today, but acknowledging the time. If you want more, feel free to chat with me after, or better yet, go read the report on our website. So previously I was showing our residential building permit data and how that sort of changed over time. It's not just how much growth we're seeing, but for the transportation system, it's also very important to know where that growth is occurring. So we do also map out all of the building permits, and you can see either in 1 year or 5 year, or honestly, if we wanted more. Thankfully, our GIS crew can summarize this information how best suits us to help us get a bigger picture of how the region is growing and what impacts that may have to our transportation system or other planning efforts you all may be working on at your agencies. Not only do we have the more visually pleasing charts and maps, we do also just have tables with the raw numbers. If you're curious for those as well, please go and check them out. Also, please fact check us. If we're missing something, let us know where it is. We'll dive into the process, see sort of why, and can get that updated. Make sure we're staying as accurate as possible. We can also break this information down in a number of different ways. For this presentation, I've focused primarily on residential. We do have commercial information included in the development monitoring report as well. But you can see things like how has housing type sort of changed throughout the year. Are we building more multifamily duplex type units, or are we building more single family detached units? And how does that fluctuate over time? And you can see there can be some pretty big spikes. So this is multifamily housing specifically. Earlier in the 2000s, wasn't a ton going on. Then we had some real high years recently. However, last year specifically was a little bit lower on the permitting side. And you can see that reflected in the numbers provided in our development monitoring report. And then we can sum up all that information and try to look at it in a couple different ways on how it impacts transportation. So these are our centroids for population, households, as well as the 2020 jobs. We don't have as much of the historical information on jobs as it comes from a different source. Thank you, Department of Labor. But for information purposes, you can see that the population and households are continually moving out west and ever so slightly north. You can also see that the population is further west than the household. So that tells us the average household size out east is a little bit smaller than on the western side of the community. And then if you look at how that relates to jobs, jobs are several miles further southeast there. And that is obviously indicative of the common commuting travel pattern we all see each morning, and then the inverse in the afternoon, so we can monitor how that changes over time, what those impacts might be. We also, using all that building permit data, annually provide population estimates. These estimates are also available on our website. We do them for all of our member agencies, cities, counties, unincorporated, incorporated, however you want it. Please go check it out. These estimates are used each year as well to determine our member agency dues that help shape our UPWP and the budget each year. So for these estimates, where we landed for this year is on the screen. We also recently, as you all have heard, have added Boise County as a member agency to Compass. So looking at the Ada, Canyon, and Boise County population estimates for 2025 landed us at over 850,000 people. Just when I started a couple years ago, we were still under 800,000. We were in the 700 somethings. So that's just showing you how fast we are growing. And as you all have helped with our forecast, you know, we're not expecting it to stop anytime soon. These estimates are calculated with a consistent little formula here. So we start with that decennial census. The 2020 census provided us all with numbers on where our population stood at that time. Then we update it each year based on those new residential units that are being permitted. We look at the household size based on the type of housing unit. Like I mentioned, the data indicates whether it's multifamily, single family, accessory dwelling unit. They all have different persons per household that we apply to them. And then thanks to our friends at Idaho Power, we have a residential occupancy rate based on the electrical load usage being used at each property. At the zip code level, they can give us an estimate on how many of those units are estimated to be occupied or inversely vacant, to make sure we're not potentially overcounting just an empty property that happens to be sitting there. So why on earth am I standing here with a math formula in front of you all this late into an RTAC meeting is a very valid question. And the reason is that all of this information matters. And we don't know how recently or how aware some of our RTAC members are that these tools are out there. So all of this information supports us as Compass staff in developing our planning efforts in monitoring what we're doing. So our vision for Communities in Motion 2055 leaned on that entitlement data. Where has development been approved, and how can that inform how our community is going to grow? Also, as much as our agencies are building a ton, we saw Communities in Motion and TIP and all the projects we're doing. We know that the development community is doing that and more throughout our region, and looking at how that impacts and supports those goals and objectives of Communities in Motion is the purpose of our Change in Motion scorecard that my coworker Hunter presents to you all every other year, with these targets that we have set for ourselves and monitors. Are we meeting them? Are we falling behind? Are we potentially going in the wrong direction? Growth has a huge impact in that as well. And also, rather than just helping us, we want to make sure that you all are using these tools as well. If you're using the development review checklist while reviewing a potential application, if you are applying for a grant and want to use the most recent population estimates, if you're just trying to figure out the housing situation that we're all struggling with, looking at what we've built and where already from the development monitoring report can hopefully help. However, if you don't know what we're providing, you then can't also provide us feedback to make it better. So please do take a moment, look at all of these tools that we have available. If there's refinements that we can make that'll make them more valuable to us, let us know. As it says, help us, help you. We're glad to do so. That's what we're here for. And with that, I will stand for questions, and thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Austin. Any questions?
Madam Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
Austin, I have a quick question about the entitlement tracking. If a city would like to verify that entitlement tracking, first, I guess, what's the preferred method of getting that data to Compass? And then how might we be able to check if our data is matching yours?
Yeah, absolutely. Very valid question. Oh man, sorry. I thought the next slide was contact information. I'll get you a card right after. Shoot us an email if you want to verify anything. We have it again all in GIS, so we can export a file, get that on over to your GIS team as well. And we're already working with your building department to get, or your planning department, to get the applications as they're submitted to the city for review. We are automatically routed them, same as ACHD, and we can get them added to our system that way. So certainly, please, glad to compare notes, so to speak, and make sure we're accurate. I'll get you my card and we can get that conversation going.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, thank you for this information. I think it was very timely with the Compass Education Series coming up on housing, so it's great.
Thank you.
Item 6 is the status reports. We have on page 31, the RTAC agenda worksheet, and on page 37, the obligation reports. Please take a look at that. That's for information only. With that, that brings us to the end. The next meeting for RTAC, we've got a little bit longer one, is September 24th of 2025, and I will stand for a motion to adjourn. We want to stay.
So moved.
All right, we have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you and have a good
Have a
day.
great day.